Okay, students, I thought in lieu of having class today, I would go ahead and find an outline of how a research proposal should look. And so here it is. I'm going to post this along with the video that I'm doing right now in the under video guides. I will put both of these things under video guides so that you can find them both in one place. This page itself, as well as this video that I'm discussing. So here's your outline for research proposal. When you do this, just look at this first paragraph here. Organize your final research proposal according to the following outline. Clearly indicate the sections of the paper by using headings that indicate, remember headings, subheadings is very useful. So use subheadings just like they've got here. You don't have to use an introduction subheading, but all the rest of them would be fine to use. But use headings that indicate where particular kinds of information can be found. Subheading may also be used in larger sections. Now, these are the headings. This would be like subheadings. Okay, so you could do it that way as well. But here's what it boils down to. You're going to first introduce your topic. Explain the issue that you're examining and why it's significant. Going back to the examples I've used in class of public school uniforms. If I were doing that, I would describe the general idea of school uniforms being studied and why it's an important issue to deal with, right? That's what you do in your introduction. So you're introducing the topic and discussing why it's important. And that's where you'll also end with your thesis, which is what you want to get out of studying this thing. So, or what you want your audience to get out of studying this, of your study of this thing. So basically, what that boils down to is like with the, if I were going to do it with the school uniforms, this would be my thesis statement along something along the lines of, I believe that school uniforms are something that all schools should be required to have because of blank, blank, and blank, and that's where I would give some reasons why I think they should be. And so that's what you do in the introduction. The background and review of literature is just like it says here. A description of what is already known about this subject that you're writing about, and a short discussion of why the background studies maybe aren't quite enough. Okay, now that I'm not so concerned about. You just want to make sure that you discuss here what is already known. So that's basically where you're going to summarize what's known about this part, about this subject that you're writing about. You might include a summary of some of the basic information that you have found as you've done your research. So you're going to talk about, in other words, in there, you're going to talk about your research. You're going to review of literature means review of your research information that you've found. So that's what you're doing here. Is just you're simply going to discuss your information that you have found in your research and why it's pertinent, why it's important to understand it. Okay, remember you're using MLA. Okay, not APA, MLA. Point out why the background studies are insufficient. In other words, what questions do they leave unresolved that you might be able to fill in the blanks with? So that's kind of what that's talking about there. And then end it with specifying one question that you're pursuing in your research proposal. Now, that's part 2. So part 3 is your rationale. In other words, your purpose. What is your question that you're examining and exploring the claims? In my case, of course, it would be that my question might be, are school uniforms really the best idea for public schools, right? And then I would give maybe some other sub-questions from that, like do school uniforms reduce bullying? Do school uniforms increase unity with students? And so forth. So I'm going to actually discuss some of my questions there and then explain what it will show about the psychology of language of your hypothesis is firm. Now this here, I'm not real sure what they're trying to say. That sounds a little odd there. But basically explain if your hypothesis is concerned, in other words, if or confirmed, in other words, if you're able to prove your theory true, how will that benefit? How will that, maybe benefit others, benefit people? How will it explain what it will suggest for others? Forget about this psychology of language stuff. I don't even know what that's there for. Um, Forget about that psychology of language stuff. Just basically explain what it's going to reveal, right? If your hypothesis is true, like for example mine, if my hypothesis about school uniforms is true and that they should be, that there's very good reason for why they should be in all schools, then that could show or that could reveal or suggest that um, education could be perhaps even transformed by the simple inclusion of this rule of everybody having to wear uniforms. It may actually make studying and it may actually make education better for students. That might be what I would say would be revealed in mine, right? Your method and design. This is a description of how you're going to go about collecting your data and testing your questions. Um, you're not required to come up with a new original method, although if you want to, you can certainly try. Look at journal articles to determine what methods are standardly used to assess knowledge. So your method is going to be how will you collect the data. Now, that might be here. Let's see what these bullet points say. Describe the general methodology you choose for your study. Explain why this method is the best for your purpose. So you will be doing your study. What mostly will be from research. So you'll describe basically the fact that you did some some intense research on the subject, looking at both sides of the issue, or perhaps even multiple sides of the issue, discussing the different people that might be involved, those stakeholders again, remember, and considering why those stakeholders, who those stakeholders would be and why they're important, things like that. But it also could include it will include, it should include, and this is where you're going to need to consider, at least temporarily, you're going to need to consider for this paper what you might want to do in the way of primary research. In other words, are you going to do a survey? Are you going to do a couple interviews? Are you going to do some observation? Whatever it might be. This is where you would describe that too. Talk about what you're going to do in the way of primary research. Describing, what kind of people you might choose to do a survey with, or what kind of people might you choose to interview, and that sort of thing, right? Some of this stuff you don't necessarily you may not even need to do some of these things. Design, well, you don't really have a whole lot of design to anything other than maybe your survey if you have one or something like that. So just kind of use common sense. If it doesn't really seem like any of it is pertinent to what you're going to be doing, then don't worry about it, right? Procedure. How are you going to present the stimuli? What is the participant in the experiment? See, this stuff is irrelevant. This right here, you could probably just forget about it right here, right? Now, your expected results, you will probably want to touch on this. What is going to confirm your hypothesis? For example, if you do interviews and the interviewees confirm what you're thinking, then that would be what you would talk about here. Or if you do a survey and the survey results reveal that a lot of people believe the same thing you believe, that's what you would talk about here, right? Your expected results. Or in other words, the results that you're hoping for, right? Then finally, number 5 here, you're going to have your conclusion. You're going to discuss in general how you proposed research would lead to significant improvement over the original papers that you've read about this issue. In other words, why should someone care? If you were applying for money in order to prove this thing true, or if you were applying for maybe a grant or something like that to do further research, why would they be interested? You don't need to even think that deeply into it, though, really, because all you're doing is just trying to prove your side of an issue, right? So you're just going to basically end this like you would any other conclusion for an essay by discussing in general what's important about your issue and what you think about it. Why should everybody care about the issue you're going to write about? In other words, in my case, I would end this by simply talking about why education in the public schools is poor right now, and why I think it could be elevated and made better through the use of or the application of school uniforms being mandated in public schools, right? And then finally, you're going to have your references. So you are going to do your references. Again, remember that your references is going to be an MLA style, and you do want to include throughout this whole thing, you want to include quotes and stuff and information from your literature, from your sources to prove things, okay? So you will want to do this. Now, it shouldn't be that hard. Just remember that some of this stuff's going to be irrelevant, and you can just skip it, all right? Do what you think in this part here of method, design, procedure. Do what you feel is worthwhile in here, and whatever you feel doesn't belong, if it doesn't seem like it matters to what you're doing, then just skip it. The main thing you're going to want to talk about in method and design is what kind of research you're going to do, how are you going to do that research, and especially how are you going to conduct your primary research, and what are you hoping it will reveal, right? Your expected results. That's the main thing you're going to talk about in this thing here. So don't look at this and say, oh, there's so much. Don't let it overwhelm you. Take it one piece at a time. Look at it like a puzzle, and just start with one piece at a time. Do your background is one piece, your rationale is one piece, with their own headings like this, their own bold subheadings like this, and you'll be done with it in no time, okay? Just remember that what you turn in when this is due, Sunday night I believe it is, when you turn this in, you will not have to worry about it being perfect, because you will have the whole second half of the semester to tweak it, fix it, resubmit it to me as many times as you want to, just like you can with everything else that you've done, right? So hopefully this will help you to kind of understand this. Just remember that, and you can do some research of your own. Do some outlines or some searching for. Do maybe a Google search for sample research proposals, sample argument research proposals, or just sample research essay proposals, and see what you can find. Maybe you'll find some that are set up the same way as this, and then you'll have an example to actually look at, okay? I did look at some of that, and a lot of the ones I was looking at weren't really relevant because they were about things that weren't like really just like an argument essay. But maybe you'll have better luck. Just do some research. If this doesn't help you enough and you need to see an actual sample, then maybe just doing a little bit of Google searching will help you to find a good sample. Just make sure it follows this same type of outline. Okay? So that's it for now, and I will see you all on Thursday. I apologize again for not being there today.